So we are all here. The time is, are we ready, Kenny? Time is 10:05, and I call the September 22nd, 2022 Planning Board meeting to order.
This conference will now be recorded.
Let me just restate that. It's 10:05, and I call the September 22, 2022 Planning Board meeting to order. We have the following board members with us. We have Vice Chair Bailey and Commissioners Giraldo and Dorner, and I'm Chair Shapiro. On to the business at hand. Please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. It's a deadline that's shown on the screen and announced in every weekly meeting. Registered speakers may join the meeting with the link provided in the email, which is provided by the planning board office, or listen by phone utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. And of course, anyone may tune in to watch the planning board meeting live via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use the online web form, which you'll see noted on the screen. In addition to the commissioners, we are joined by Deputy Planning Director Derek Rillage. I believe I saw Planning Director Checkley as well. We have David Warner, our Principal Counsel, Jessica Jones, our Planning Board Administrator, Marie Proctor, who is our Senior Technical Hearing Writer, James Hunt, who is the Division Chief of the Development Review Division. And we are also supported by Kenneth Flanagan and Ryan Cron, who Kenneth guides us through our exhibits, and Ryan helps with all the technical stuff in the background. So thanks to all of them. We're going to change up the order of business a bit, so please note the confusing order, Commissioners. We're going to go with items 2, then 3A, then 3C, then 4D, then 5, 8, 9, then item 6, item 7, and we're going to conclude with item 3B. Before we get into the items on the agenda, I just want to take a moment to share some sad news. We have a couple bits that I wanted to share with you all, a couple of losses. One is within our commission family. So our thoughts are with Glenn Burton, a transportation planner in the countywide planning division of the planning department. Glenn lost his wife, Liz, on Saturday evening. So we extend our condolences to Glenn and his son, his daughter, and grandchildren. Difficult news indeed. And then in addition to that, within Prince George's County, I think I've all heard the news at this point, but we have lost a good man, a strong leader for the county, and a good friend, David Harrington. David was a former elected official, community leader, and worked throughout the years in a number of different roles at the county, state, municipal level, and the nonprofits. He was mayor of the town of Bladensburg. He represented District 5 in the county council. He was a senator in the General Assembly. He was president of the Chamber of Commerce. His most recent role was with Kaiser Permanente. David was truly a visionary leader and had an impact on Prince George's County in all sorts of ways. I just can't even tell you how shocked I am and numbed to see David pass so early. He had such a great impact on this county. And my thoughts, and I imagine all of our thoughts, are with his wife Cheryl and the boys in these very, very difficult times. So if we could take just a moment of silence to recognize these two losses, Glenn's wife and David Harrington. Just a brief moment of silence. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Anything else from commissioners before we get into the items? Thank you. So let's begin with item 2 on the agenda. This is a motion to approve the draft minutes of September 15, 2022. Is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
I've got a motion by Commissioner Giraldo, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? I'll call the roll. Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it, 4-0. Next item on our agenda is item 3A, legislation. This is CB 97-2022. This is a bill to eliminate development standards for expedited transit-oriented development in the LTO zone and tie the requirement for a detailed site plan to certain project characteristics rather than the size of the project. We have a staff recommendation, actually with Ms. Hightower, who will be speaking to this. Why don't you take it away?
Good morning, Chair and members of the Planning Board. For the record, Raina Hightower. Thank you, Chairman, for going over the preliminaries of the bill. Staff had numerous comments and a number of concerns. First and foremost, the language redeveloped as a mixed-use development that is within the bill. That language is unclear and makes it hard to determine which projects apply to the bill. This bill, CB 97, contradicts the goals of the new zoning ordinance, which are predictability, quality development, and consistent application of development standards, because this bill allows a subset of properties to be developed through the DSP process. This bill also threatens implementation of the 2022 approved Adelphi Road, University of Maryland Purple Line Station sector plan, which was based on uniform applications of the LTO zone regulations. The draft bill also impacts the West Hydesville, Queens Chapel sector plan and proposed SMA, which will require numerous revisions because some properties within that plan will be able to develop according to the standards of this bill if enacted. Staff has recommended amendments to the bill if the District Council moves forward with the bill. Staff believes it is too soon to make substantial procedural revisions to the new zoning ordinance. The old zoning ordinance approaches which are used in this bill have proven unsuccessful in achieving the county's desired policy goals. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Board vote to oppose CB 97-2022.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Hightower. And I would join in the remarks of staff, having had a number of conversations about this specific bill with staff members as well. The emphasis here is on substantial. This bill, as described, would have a substantial and we believe negative impact on the county. So I would support staff's recommendation to oppose. But let me open it up for any discussion or questions for staff before I look for a motion.
No discussion. Vote to oppose, Mr. Chair.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Ms. Hightower. So moving on to our next item on the agenda, item 3C. This is our fiscal year 24 budget outlook, our first look at the budget. Mr. Kroll, John Kroll, will be walking us through a presentation on this. There's no action needed on this item. This is just a briefing. As you all know better than me, we'll have a few more bites at this apple. So this is the first one and it's a briefing. So take it away, Mr. Kroll.
Thank you, and let me share my screen if I might be allowed to.
Yes, sir.
I see your screen, but if you would allow me to share mine, it might go a little smoother.
Oh, I see. Hold on one sec. Let's see if we can do it. Give us one technical second. Okay, it should work now. In theory.
There we go. And from the beginning.
Good place to start, Mr. Kroll.
Okay. As Chair Shapiro mentioned, this is the first step in the, or the next step in the budget development process for fiscal year 24. We will touch on several things here. Key trends, we'll look at the revenue estimates this year. We'll look at expenditure estimates, the main things that drive some of our base expenditures. And then we'll look at the strategy for moving forward. First, we'll look at the assessable base trend, property valuations, real property. From fiscal year 16 to 23, assessable base has grown by about 47%. Projected by the Prince George's County OMB to increase by about 2.65% in fiscal year 24. Property tax revenue obviously is the primary source of funding for services, and as you can see from the description on the left, excluding fund balance and interfund transfers, it represents the vast majority of revenues to fund the programs and services that we provide. Expenditure trends, the increase in the, you'll see here, this is a stacked graph, shows administration fund on the bottom, park fund next, recreation fund on top. A couple things to point out, the increase in the administration fund in fiscal year 21 was due to a one-time transfer to the Largo headquarters building internal service fund. And then similarly in fiscal year 23, similar transfers for the park and recreation funds. Beginning in fiscal year 19, the recreation fund is also a little larger due to contributing CIP PAYGO for the first time. And in fiscal year 23, we have a large investment that council added last year towards athletic field development. And certainly stop me anywhere you like and ask questions if you want to do so. Personnel cost pressures are one of the largest, obviously. We're heavily impacted by wage increases, health insurance, OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, which is health insurance for retirees, and retirement. And then we'll look at each of those in turn. This is a historical graph of project charges. As you can see, we spent a long time reducing those down from a level that they had gotten up to in 2012. No further reductions are currently scheduled. They were increased by about $250,000 in fiscal year 22 and about $600,000 in fiscal year 23. Our understanding from OMB is that the county executive has hired a consultant to examine the appropriate level of project charges going forward. And we look forward to the results of that study. This is a series of graphs that was asked for several years ago to look at how we historically use fund balance. The key takeaway here is that our use of fund balance is usually, if not always, better than budgeted. One exception that is quite visible on here is the administration fund, and that was, again, the transfer to Largo. That was not an originally proposed budget transfer for mid-year in the administration fund in fiscal year 21. Budget outlook going forward. As of the March State Department of Assessments and Taxation estimate, Prince George's assessable base for fiscal year 24 is projected to increase about 2.6% from the fiscal year 23 budget. This projection will be revisited when the November SSTAT numbers are released. Here you can see the increased preliminary estimate of increased property tax revenues by fund. General cost pressures that we see going forward in fiscal year 24, again, employee compensation, health insurance, OPEB PAYGO, retirement, operating budget impact for new facilities, debt service, and infrastructure needs. Outlook for benefits based on our health insurance consultant. is expected to result in an increase of just shy of 10% for fiscal year 24. Estimated cost increase for OPEB is currently based on last year's actuarial valuation, and that suggested a 4.1% increase, or about $500,000 increase between the three funds. These estimates will be updated when the actuarial report for this year is completed. We'll know that around the 1st of November. Retirement will also know around the 1st of November when that actuarial valuation is completed. The previous valuation showed a decrease of about 10% for fiscal year 24. Personally, I've been burned by going with decreases at this early in the process. So for the time being, we're showing a flat retirement cost, and we'll see what how that works out come November when the valuation is released. Employee compensation. We discussed at closed session of this month's executive committee meeting the assumptions behind these amounts. At this stage, we're projecting salary markers of about $13.1 million between the three funds. Those figures include fiscal year 23's annualization of fiscal year 23's wage adjustments, the effects of the continuing effects of the reclassification process, and a salary marker for fiscal year 24. Further information regarding compensation, we have full contract negotiations starting for FOP, police union. We have a wage and benefits reopener for McGeo. And recommendation here is obviously to budget a compensation dollar marker at the fund level in the proposed budget. CIP related, capital budget related, operating budget impact, prospectively for various projects that are shown listed on the left. We have small dollar amounts of operating budget impact, about $50,000 for the park fund and $100,000 for the recreation fund, plus startup costs for about $150,000 in the recreation fund. Startup costs are listed separately because they'll be removed from the budget the following year. Debt service increase of about $3.1 million, and a capital projects pay-go decrease of about $15.6 million. So total CIP-related expenses are a negative $12 million for the park fund and a positive $250,000 for the recreation fund. This chart combines the last several figures from the last several slides, health insurance, OPEB, retirement compensation, and so on. Down at the bottom is the Athletic Field Council initiative. That was $35 million in the recreation fund for fiscal year 23. That's a one-time expense, so it's shown here as coming out of the budget for fiscal year 24. And we have a look at each of the three funds, comparing the property tax revenue estimate versus the expenditure estimates that are shown in the previous slides. On the graph on the left shows the comparison between the revenue and base level expenditures. Again, these expenditures do not include any new initiatives or increased programmatic expenditures. These are just the base expenditure pressures that we showed in the previous slides. Any difference between property tax revenue and the expenditure level will be coming out of fund balance. And you see a projected ending fund balance graph on the right, which shows that slight decrease in the fund balance in the administration fund. Moving on to the park fund, we show a property tax revenue, $4.6 million. And again, we show the decrease in expenditures. So it shows an increase then on the right in the projected fund balance for ending fiscal year 24. And then recreation, we show a slight increase in the property tax revenue, and again, the expenditure decrease Most of that was the 35 million coming out for the athletic field initiative. Budget strategy for fiscal year 24, continue to address infrastructure improvement needs in our facilities, with pay-go from both the park and recreation funds, to develop new maintenance standards for trails, ball fields, playgrounds, continue to focus on organizational stability through our work program analysis and succession planning, continue process of redesigning the department's website, to continue implementation of 6-year planning work program, continue training and education programs to explain the new zoning ordinances to residents in the business community, continue investing in our IT infrastructure to improve critical parts of our IT environment to help support the Commission's mission, and to increase social media outreach by utilizing new tools to connect with residents and visitors. Moving quickly on to assumptions for our 6-year outlook. These are the major assumptions that we apply to the operating budget. As you can see, somewhat flat assessable base growth, but still growth. Wage assumptions are, again, salary markers that we don't publicize. The assumptions behind health and health benefits. The first 2 years are based on our provided by the health insurance consultant, and the last 3 years are from our OPEB consultant, the trend of health insurance costs. OPEB pre-funding and pay-go and retirement are all based on our current valuations, and those are subject to change with the release of the November valuations. Services and supplies. For fiscal year 24, we are showing an increase in inflation due to what we're experiencing currently, an 8% increase in services, 5% in supplies, and then returning per Federal Reserve's estimates of 2% moving forward after that. Fund specific assumptions. We've had longstanding needs for CIS space, and that's shown beginning in fiscal year 26. That may change with new direction coming forth. Debt issuance for the park fund. These are new debt issues projected going out to fund our capital improvements program. And then the last 2 lines are CIP pay-go, which is cash coming in again to fund capital improvements in our capital improvement program from both the park and the recreation funds. The next 3 slides show graphs by fund of 6-year projections. And we show that each of the 3 funds shows that total expenditures being managed within property tax revenues through fiscal year 29. Obviously, we have utilized the same level of taxation for a number of years now. We built up fund balances in the beginning part of that time, and now we're working those fund balances down. And as you'll see from the bottom graph, the fund balances continue to be utilized to balance within the 6-year period. Park fund, similarly. And the recreation fund as well. Our 6-year strategy, continuing to plan for the relocation of our administrative offices to a new headquarters building, continuing to implement the planning department's 6-year work program. Department of Parks and Recreation, we're maintaining and upgrading existing infrastructure by utilizing fund balances in the park and recreation funds. We're developing innovative arts and cultural programs and activities for teens, seniors, and youth, emphasizing this county's diverse culture, and increasing social media outreach. Again, a summary of the project charges. Current project charge totals just under $9 million. Changes, if any, will come from County Council in the spring as they work through the development of the adopted budget. The budget timeline, we began last month with the spending affordability preliminary view. This is the planning board budget overview. We'll have budget forums on the October 4th and 18th for the public to comment on what they'd like to see in our budget. On October 13th will be the presentation of preliminary department budget estimates to the planning board. And November 17th will be the final presentation and approval of the proposed departmental budgets. The end of November, we'll meet again with the Spending Affordability Committee. And then at the December commission meeting, the commission will approve the fiscal year 24 proposed budget, upon which the budget office, as well as all the budget folks out in the departments, will put together narrative and tables for publication of the proposed budget books, and those will be submitted to the county executive and county council by January 15th. That's basically the end of my presentation. What follows in the packet that you have, as well as on screen, if you're like to see, are the numbers that behind those 6-year projection charts by revenue type and expenditure type and such, and then the assumptions more delineated by each fund and so on. And that is the close of my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Question?
Yeah, I have one. Uh-oh. Mr. Kroll, do you anticipate any saving by our move in terms of, the $2+ million that we paid to the county council?
I have not yet seen any estimation for the operating and maintenance of the facility that we are in the process of working toward. As soon as I have that in hand, I'll be able to answer that question for you. I do not expect it to cost any more than what we are currently spending at this time.
And how much is it that we're currently paying to the county council?
I wish I had that on the tip of my tongue.
No problem. That's all right.
I'd be happy to send that to you. It's yes.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Kroll. Thank you for the presentation. As usual, it's detailed and it's thorough, and I like to see graphs, so I'm very partial to that. Two kinds of questions I'm kind of thinking forward, and not necessarily to adjust in this presentation right now, but as we start to think for like the 5-year forward plan, and we're looking at sort of budgetary smoothing, and we've got the property tax that's kind of phased in over a 3-year incremental period, so that at least reduces the volatility of collections. But what happens if property taxes begin to not come in as much as expected, or potentially drop if there's any sort of a decline in housing markets? I noticed that the property tax revenue dropped in fiscal year 24 in some of the graphs, but that's probably just mechanical in some way. But that might actually be the start of when we would begin to see any sort of declines if we hit like a recession in 2023 or anything like that. And then it'll continue over into the next 3 years as it kind of gets phased in if that happens. So if you could kind of comment on that, or if you've sort of thought through it. And then relatedly to financial markets, I'm just interested in debt servicing that we have and sort of resetting on short-term debt servicing. If that's going to increase in the cost with the interest rate environment going up, particularly with the recent FOMC meeting yesterday and bumping it up 75 basis points.
Well, let me answer the last question first. It might very well impact our future cost of debt service. That is one reason, is that we noted, Secretary Treasurer of the Commission noted that the rates were starting to rise and went early to market this last month to lock in a rate for a large issue. So we're doing our best to follow those and mitigate those costs. As for your question on property tax values, I think what you noted in the graph was the not the drop in property tax revenue, but the lower growth rate. And yes, if we do experience, as we have in the past during recessionary times, a slowing of growth or a falling of property values, we are, as you noted, insulated over a 3-year period from the worst effects of that hitting immediately. So that gives us time, once that begins, to start looking at our operational costs and seeing what can be done to lower those or flatline those to deal with the lower revenue forecasts. So we do pay close attention to that. We've been through that before, and we will do our best to ride it out when it comes again.
Okay. Yeah, I think we just need to keep that definitely on the radar, because we're not going to continue to see 20% growth in property values on any sort of a sustained basis, and even 10% growth would be quite high at half that rate. So let's just kind of keep that in mind as we're planning, that even though we might be flush in money, it would be, and there might be expenditures that we can use for those funds to definitely improve services. I just want to make sure we're not setting up permanent programs with that, assuming that this money is going to come in all the time, because it very likely will not at some point, and the question is kind of when. So yeah, if you can just keep that in the radar, that'd be great.
Certainly. No, we are cognizant of the limitations of such forecasts. We know, again, as you note, that there will become another recession, and the problem is that none of us have a crystal ball as to when. So most forecasters at the governmental level don't actually pick a year as to when that might occur. We try to be conservative in our forecasts to allow for enough time to react when they do show up.
Okay, good. I appreciate it. If you do find that crystal ball, then both you and I can retire early. So let me know if you find it.
I will let you know when I do.
I also have a question, Mr. Chairman. It's a minor question, however. The project charges, small they may be, in some cases, there is a slight increase this year. What accounts for the increase in project charges?
Again, council charges are directed by the council, and they were a little more generous with their additions to the project charges this past year. If you'd like, I can try to locate the current list of those and send them to you if you'd like to see them in comparison to the previous year.
That would be fine. Just send it to them. We don't need to discuss it now, but just send it to us later.
Be happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Only question I have is related to vacancies. We still have a substantial number of vacancies. I think both of our operating agencies are really working hard to address this, but we still have a fair number of vacancies on both the planning side and the Parks and Rec side. How do you budget for that?
Each of the departments is free to budget a certain level of lapse savings based on historical vacancy levels. I quite frankly don't recall to what level Prince George's departments budget for such. Montgomery is very, the council is very strict in requesting a level of vacancy budgeting on the Montgomery side of the commission. In the past, we haven't needed to here, but if the level of vacancies continues to be problematic, obviously since it is currently, we might very well, we find ourselves unable in the long term to keep full, staffing at a level that we desire, then it might be appropriate to increase those lapsed budgets just to ease some general pressure on the overall budget.
Thank you for that. If you could put together some kind of numbers that sort of and to I think Commissioner Dorner would appreciate this, but graphically, to help us make sense of the trend related to the vacancies, how we budget forward, and what we might expect.
Will do.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for commissioners for Mr. Kroll? Okay, this is a briefing, so we're not looking for any action. I appreciate your time and your thoughtful responses and all the work that goes into the preparation for this, and we will be talking to you again soon.
And we'll see you October 13th.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, commissioners, moving on to the next item on our agenda. This is the consent agenda. And we have one item on the consent agenda. Item 4D is the final plat of subdivision. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Dorner, I believe. Any discussion on the motion? I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. Ayes have it 4-0 to adopt the consent agenda. Now we move on to our regular agenda items, beginning with item 5. Item 5 is a detailed site plan, DSP 21024 Ecograds. There's a motion to approve. There's a request for a continuance on this item. Let me turn it over to staff to give us an overview on this. And I don't think we're going to be taking up a lot of time on this item, but Mr. Bishop.
Good morning, Chairman Shapiro and members of the board. For the record, Andrew Bishop with the Prince George's County Park and Planning Department. In a letter dated September 22nd, 2022, included in your backup, the applicant's representative, Matt Tedesco, requested a continuance of DSP 21024 for Ecograds from September 22nd, 2022 to September 29th, 2022 to allow additional time to address outstanding issues. Staff recommends approval of this request.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Mr. Tedesco, is there anything that you want to add to this before we take action?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board. No, we would submit on the letter. Thank Mr. Bishop for his review, and we look forward to bringing this case back to you all next week, and would respectfully request the 1-week continuance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have no additional backup or exhibits. There's no other speakers on the sign-up sheet. Staff recommendation is to approve the request for continuance to September 29, 2022. Any questions from commissioners?
No questions, Mr. Chairman, but I move that we approve the request for continuance to September 29th, 2022.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Discussion on the motion? Call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0 for the to approve the request for continuance. Next item on our agenda is, thank you, Mr. Bishop, and thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Next item is item 8, reconsideration for a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-05109 Goodman Heights. Let me turn it over to Mr. Heath.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Antoine Heath with subdivision section. Item 8 is a reconsideration of preliminary plan of subdivision 4-05109 Goodman Heights for the review of revised impacts to environmental areas on the site, which were necessary due to additional environmental features found on the property since its initial approval. Based on the information provided by the applicant and included in the backup, and analysis presented in staff's memorandum, staff recommends approval of the reconsideration with the revised findings and additional conditions as set forth in staff's memorandum. If it is the pleasure of the board to make a motion, this will conclude staff's presentation. Otherwise, I would be happy to provide additional detailed presentation of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. Commissioners, do you anyone need more information on this matter? This is it's a reconsideration for preliminary subdivision. Staff is recommending that we approve the reconsideration. Any any more details you need from staff? And if not, I'll turn to Mr. Haller if he has any comments. Okay, Mr. Haller, anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thomas Haller on behalf of the owner of the property, LAH Goodman LLC. No, I have nothing more to add. As the staff report notes, variations related to the development of this property were originally approved in 2007, but when the permits were obtained from MDE for those impacts, the regulated environmental features had been reconfigured. And so in order to ensure that the impacts approved by the planning board are the same as those approved by MDE in their permits, this reconsideration was needed. We concur with staff's recommendation and the 2 additional conditions that they have proposed to add as drafted and have no proposed changes. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. Any questions for the applicant, commissioners? If not, I'm sorry, is there one?
Yeah, Commissioner Norton, just to be sure. So I think, Mr. Haller, you're requesting reconsideration on the basis of inadvertence of another good cause and furtherance of public interest. Is that correct?
That's correct. That was the basis for the reconsideration when the board approved it a while back, and that continues to be our justification for the reconsideration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. If there's no further questions, then I would look for a motion.
Move approval of the reconsideration on the preliminary plan of subdivision 4-051-109.
Second.
Just for clarification in the motion, is it for PPS 4-05109 or 051-109? I think you added maybe too many ones.
4-051-109. If I added one, it was my error, but I'm looking.
Hold on one second. I just want to make sure we have the information correct. Okay, so I think we're correct now. I'm looking, is there staff let's check in. Is that do we have the complete motion? Is there anything else that we need to add? The approval of this case with conditions, and that's good enough?
Yes, that is correct. The findings were revised and 2 conditions were added.
Okay, thanks. So we have a motion. Who made the motion?
I did.
Okay, Commissioner Giraldo and who made the second?
Bailey.
Vice Chair Bailey. Clearly I wasn't paying attention, but thanks everybody. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? I'll call the roll. Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
But
I vote aye as well. Ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Heath. Next item on our agenda is item 9. This is a countywide planning division master plan of transportation 2035 projection extension transmittal. We have Mr. Capers and Ms. Hancock who will be presenting. There is action being requested from us on this, so and I'll turn it over to Ms. Hancock.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I am Crystal Saunders Hancock, Planner 4 in the Transportation Planning section of the Countywide Planning Division. I have the pleasure to serve as the project manager for the Master Plan of Transportation 2035 project. I'm here today to request the approval of an 8-week extension to prepare the MPOT 2035 project pursuant to Section 27-644A3 of the zoning ordinance. There are 2 items in the backup associated with this agenda item. First is the memo to the board, and second is a draft transmittal letter to the county council. On September 21st, 2021, the Prince George's County Council, sitting as the district council, initiated the Master Plan of Transportation 2035 project. The Office of the Clerk of the County Council has identified a scheduling conflict with the joint public hearing for the Master Plan of Transportation scheduled, as well as the FY24 budget season schedule and work sessions. To support the County Council's work program and schedule, the Planning Department will require an 8-week extension to the previously estimated time based on the regulatory requirements for the project. Staff recommends the planning board grant permission to print and release the preliminary master plan of transportation 2035 and transmit the public facilities referral to the county executive beginning on or about March 23rd, 2023. This extension slightly impacts the final approval of the master plan, which is now scheduled for the December 2023 timeframe. This ends my presentation. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hancock. Questions for staff on this item? If there are no questions, then I'd look for action. The motion would be to approve the staff recommendation for an AB project sanction for transmittal to the county council. Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner Geraldo. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Geraldo.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
But aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Would I?
I vote aye as well. Ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Ms. Hancock, for your
Thank
for your
you.
work on
Have
this.
a good day.
You too. Next item on our agenda is item 6. This is DSP 22007 Cherry Lane Storage. Let me turn it over to staff. We have Ms. Butler. We have Mr. Antonetti representing the applicant. There's a significant amount of backup on this. We're going to read a bunch of it into the record. But let me turn it over to Ms. Butler first.
Right. Good morning, Chairman and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I am Tiara Butler with the Urban Design Section. The item before you is item number 6, detailed site plan DSP-22007 for Cherry Lane Storage, which is a detailed site plan for the construction of a 3-story, 108,273 square foot consolidated storage facility with 895 units and a manager's office. Next slide, please. This site is located in Prince George's County Planning Area 62 and Council District 1 as identified in the yellow color area on the map. Next slide, please. This site is located in the southwest quadrant of intersection of Cherry Lane and Cherry Lane Court. The site boundary is shown on the vicinity map outlined in red. Next slide, please. This subject property is zoned industrial employment, i.e. under the current zoning ordinance as shown in the gray color on the zoning map shown on the left side of your screen. And then the subject property was zoned light industrial I-1 under the prior zoning ordinance as shown with the gray color on the right side of your screen. Next slide, please. This slide shows that the site is not located within any overlay zone. Next slide, please. This slide shows the aerial view and the existing conditions of the property. There is an existing office building located on the site. This slide also shows the locations of the nearby storage facilities. And there are currently 4 storage locations within a half a mile on the site, near the site, or from the site, I guess. And these locations are shown on the map with the red dots. So if you notice, there are 4 red dots that show the locations. Next slide, please. This site contains slopes as shown with the red contour lines on the map. Next slide, please. This slide shows the master plan right-of-way, which identifies both Cherry Lane, Baltimore Avenue, and Laurel Road as arterial roadways, as shown with the red color on the map. Next slide, please. This slide shows the bird's eye view of the property, which shows the existing 28,862 square foot office building that is located on the site. Next slide, please. And this slide shows the proposed development, which contains an existing 4th story, 28,862 272 square foot office building that is proposed to be raised for the construction of a 3-story, 108,273 square foot consolidated storage facility with 895 storage units with a 1,1200 square foot manager's office. And the site will have 2 vehicular access points from Cherry Lane Court with the access gates and fencing surrounding the site. The site will contain 25 parking spaces to include 1 handicap accessible space, 5 12-foot by 45-foot loading spaces, 11 RV and boat spaces, and then 3 bike racks for a total of 6 bike spaces. And the site will contain a 10-foot by 10-foot dumpster pad and enclosure. Next slide, please. This slide shows the landscape plan. The landscape plan provided with the subject DSP contains the required schedules and demonstrates conformance with the landscape manual. Next slide, please. This slide shows the Type 2 tree conservation plan. Next slide, please. And this slide shows the architectural elevations. The applicant is proposing modern architecture style for the building. The building will be 3 stories and 36 feet tall. The building's materials will consist of a combination of masonry and decorative metal paneling. The building will include decorative canopies and colored wall panels and lighted backlight display boxes. And there will be automatic sliding doors and storage roll-up doors in the loading space areas. This slide also shows the elevations for the front-facing Cherry Lane Court at the top image. And then the bottom image shows the side elevation facing Cherry Lane to the northeast. Next slide, please. This slide shows the architectural elevations as well. The top image shows the elevations from the back elevation. And then the bottom image shows the side elevation to the northwest. Next slide, please. And this slide shows the proposed signage and fencing details. The site will contain 2 building-mounted signs. The first sign will be located on the side elevation facing Cherry Lane from the northeast, and it will total 203.28 square feet and will be 6 feet by 33 feet long. The sign will include a logo with the words CubeSmart. And then the second sign will be located on the front elevation facing Cherry Lane Court from the northwest and will be a total of 411.63 square feet and 16 feet by 24 feet long. And it will include the words CubeSmart Self-Storage. And the site will contain a 6-foot tall chain link fence with a 6-foot tall access gate, as well as an 8-foot tall dumpster enclosure with an access gate. Next slide, please. And with that, urban design staff recommend that planning board adopt the findings of this report and approve detailed site plan DSP-22007 and type 2 conservation plan TCP2-020-2022 for Cherry Lane storage, subject to the conditions found on page 10, 11, and 12 of the staff report. And the applicant has submitted revised findings, and the staff has included a supplemental analysis as part of the additional backup to provide additional clarification to support the consolidated storage use. And both the applicant and staff are in agreement with the revised findings and the supplemental analysis. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Cutler, for the report, for the very thorough report. Well done. Commissioners, are there questions for Ms. Cutler? No questions? Okay, thank you very much. Let me turn to the applicant to see if you have anything that you would like to add to this.
Yes, good morning, Chair Shapiro, members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Robert Antonetti with the law firm of Shipley & Horn. Today with me is my partner, Mr. Russell Shipley, and our senior land planner, Mr. John Ferrante. Just for purposes of introductions, representing the applicant team today, we have Mr. Bobby Akins from the applicant, Mr. Andy Bradshaw, civil engineer with JBA, Ms. Rebecca Brown, the architect from BWD Architects, and Mr. Michael Lenhart from Lenhart Traffic Consulting. I'd like to thank Ms. Butler for her thorough review as well. I appreciate working with her, and the collaboration on this case is very much welcome. As you heard today, this proposal does involve a 108,273 square foot consolidated storage facility that's in the IE zone, industrial employment. It is developing pursuant to the I-1 regulations, which is permitted pursuant to the transitional provisions of the county zoning ordinance. The building proposed is a modern multi-story structure. However, while it doesn't exceed the 36-foot height limitation for such a use, it is actually lower than the current office building that is on the property, which will be raised. The older office building has come upon some tough times. The applicant purchased the building not too long ago, and it's in need of, the site is in need of rehabilitation and something different. If I could, and I don't mean to belabor the hearing, if I could, just for the record, ask Mr. Akins to speak for a minute just on the thoughts of why you would take a site that's developed and place something as proposed here in this application in its stead. So with the chair's discretion, I'd like to call Mr. Akins very, very briefly to speak to that issue.
Of course. Welcome, Mr. Akins. Take it away.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thanks for your time. My name is Bobby.
Mr. Akins, I'm going to interrupt a second. It may or may not be your intention, but we can't see you. We can hear you, but we can't see you.
My camera is showing as on in the app.
I hate to ask a silly question, but do you have one of those little screen covers over your camera? Because it shows on here too, but we don't see anything.
I do not.
Okay. It's worth asking. Hold on one second. No problem. Hold on one. So, Mr. Akins, just identify yourself for the record and then continue, even though we can't see you, because we can hear you. So it's okay.
Okay. My name is Bobby Akins. I am representing the owner and applicant Cherry Lane Project, LLC, on behalf of Washington Property Company. So just as Rob introduced, wanted to briefly go over our view of this site and why we've proceeded with this application. The site is an underutilized office building that is surrounded by light industrial uses. The property has historically had low vacancy and fallen into minor disrepair, in large part given its location and the surrounding uses. So we acquired the site a little less than a year ago with the intention to redevelop it into something that was more in keeping with the uses in this area and to provide a modern facility in contrast to some of the unconditioned older storage facilities that surround it. So we believe that this site will provide a significant community benefit to the surrounding businesses and residential neighborhoods by providing a clean, modern storage facility. And we also believe that with the redevelopment of this site, we will be significantly increasing the tax basis for this property. So happy to answer any further questions on that, but that's all I want to say today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akins. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Akins? If not, I'll turn it back to Mr. Antonetti. Okay, take it away, Mr. Antonetti.
Thank you. Thank you for that discretion and allowing Mr. Akins to testify. Again, we do agree with the staff recommendations in this case. I will point out in the rear of the building, there is some parking areas that will be fenced, and that area has two gates. Those gates have a mesh that over those automated gates that obscures views from any street. There's also a board-on-board fence with landscaping in front of it along that rear area, which acts as a wall that screens both the landscaping and the fence. Wooden board-on-board fence acts as a wall that screens anything from the back. In the back of Cherry Lane Court, there, as you can see from this aerial, there are numerous light industrial uses, and this will be a very attractive face to that Cherry Lane Court business park if and when it's approved. With that, we would recommend respectfully that the board supports the staff's recommendations and findings. There is an applicant exhibit 1, which just asks for finding 7 to be slightly modified to reference the applicant's statements in its statement of justification dated March 15th regarding certain code provisions relative to detailed site plans and consolidated storage specifically. We have gone over that with staff, and we believe they're in support of that of those revised findings, as you heard today. So with that, we would again respectfully request your support of this application and recommend approval of DSP 22007. And we do thank you for your consideration of this request. And our team is here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Antonetti. Commissioners, I'll check in with staff to make sure that they're concurring with that recommendation for the modification of finding 7. But setting that aside, are there any other questions for the applicant? Okay, if not, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this application? We had a few folks signed up. I don't know if there's anybody who is here to sign up. Mr. Flanagan? Just checking to see if there's anyone else who's here to speak on this case. Okay, so we've no one else signed up to speak. So let me turn back to staff just to make sure that staff concurs with the applicant's note that you all have agreed to modify finding 7 slightly. No concerns around that from staff?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. We are in full agreement.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that, let me turn it over to you all, commissioners. What is your pleasure on this? You've heard staff's recommendation.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve DSP 2007 along with the staff's findings as modified by applicant's exhibit number 1, which revises. Hold on 1 sec. You got it? Okay, continue. Sorry. Which revises finding 7 as put forth in the record, and along with the associated conditions, and we adopt DSP 22007 as well as approval of the Type 2 Tree Conservation Plan TCP 2-020-2022.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Antonetti. Thank you, Ms. Butler. We have item number 7. This is a 4-21057 Alton, New Carrollton. Let me turn it over to staff, Ms. Gupta.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Doing a sound check.
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, I'm Ridula Gupta with the subdivision section. Item number 7 on the agenda is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21057 titled Alton, New Carrollton, which proposes 1 parcel for development of 320 multifamily dwelling units. This application is supported by an approved certificate of adequacy. Based on the findings presented in the technical staff report, staff recommends that the planning board approve this preliminary plan of subdivision 4-21057, type 1 tree conservation plan TCP 1-013-2022, and a variation from section 24-1222A, subject to the conditions in the staff report. The applicant has proposed minor changes to the language in condition 3, which is included in the additional backup, and staff is in agreement with this revision. If it is the pleasure of the board to make a motion, this would conclude staff's presentation Otherwise, I would be happy to provide additional detailed presentation of this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta. Commissioners, we have the backup for this item. We'll hear from the applicant in a second. Staff and the applicant agreement. There's no one else on to speak on behalf of this. But do you have questions for staff before I turn to the applicant? No questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gupta. Mr. Gibbs.
Yes,
Anything
good
you wanna
morning. Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. Edward Gibbs, an attorney with offices in Largo. And I am here representing the applicant this morning. The applicant is a limited liability company, but it is owned, formed, and controlled by Wood Partners, a national developer and owner of multifamily product throughout the United States, headquartered in Atlanta. This is actually the sixth different multifamily project that is proposed by Wood Partners. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail of that next week when the detailed site plan for this project is before the board. But I just did want to identify that. We do have Mr. Scott Zimmerly and Mr. Zach Albert from Wood Partners who are here today and happy to answer any questions, as well as our civil engineer, Nick Speech from Bowler, and our transportation engineer, Maribel Wong from Grove Slade. Just suffice it to say, this is a single one-lot preliminary subdivision plan with a maximum proposal of 320 multifamily units. We do appreciate the opportunity to have worked with Ms. Gupta and other members of the staff of the Park and Planning Commission. Ms. Gupta, as is always the case, was responsive, suggested thoughtful changes that made the product and the proposal better. And we certainly appreciate everything she's done to bring this case forward to you this morning with the recommendation of approval. I would simply say that we did have meetings with the civic associations, West Lanham Hills and Hanson Oaks, on two different occasions, once at the outset of this project and once this past Monday, September 19th. And we do have just the one modification to condition 3, which is set forth in my letter to you, Mr. Chairman, dated September 19th. And I think it speaks for itself. It just sort of clarifies the position relative to mandatory dedication and makes it clear that the ordinance requirement is going to be satisfied by private facilities in lieu of mandatory dedication on the property. So with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any other questions. I would simply and respectfully request that condition 3 be modified in accord with our proposal, which Ms. Gupta indicated staff has no objections to. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Questions for Mr. Gibbs? No question. Let me just say that this is a
I have one question, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I wasn't,
Commissioner.
Mr. Gibbs, is that applicant's one, the change to condition 3?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I just want to say this is a nice project that's going to add to the quality density that we're seeing around the new Carrollton station, and it's just exciting to see. So, and it's nice to have the quality development partners like Wood involved as well. So, if there's no questions for staff, no further questions to the applicant, I just want to make sure, is there anyone else who is signed up who wishes to speak on this matter? Have anybody? Okay, so we have nobody else. So with that, we'll wrap this up and I'll turn it back to you, commissioners. What's your pleasure in this item? Commissioner Giraldo, you're on mute. There we go. You're good to go.
Do you see me? Because I don't see anybody. But you hear me That's
we can
fine.
hear and see you, so go for it.
Oh, I just can't see you. Okay, that's good. So, Mr. Chair, I would move that we adopt the findings of staff as well as the conditions and the condition modified, condition 3 modified in accordance with applicant's exhibit number 1, and that we approve preliminary plan of subdivision Alta New Carrollton 4-21057 of the approval as well of the type 1 tree conservation plan TCP 1-013-2022 and approval of a variation from section 24-1228.
We have a motion. We have a second. Just to clarify the motion and the seconder, that's approval with revised conditions, correct, for 4-21057?
Revised condition, yes.
Thank you. So we have a
Yeah.
motion, a second. Any discussion on the motion? I'll call the roll. Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Thank you, Ms. Gupta, for your work on this.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Chairman and members of the
Gibbs,
board.
it sounds like we'll see you and your team next week.
Indeed. Thank you. We look forward to it.
Great. Thank you. So our last item on our agenda is executive session. So let me read this in pursuant to the general provisions of General Provisions Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, Article 3-305, subsection B3 and B7. We're going to go into executive session to discuss the acquisition of real property and to consult with counsel for a public purpose and matters directly related to the acquisition. This executive session is necessary to maintain the confidentiality of the Commission's negotiating position in order to preserve public funds. Is there a motion to that effect, Commissioners?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, to go into executive session as read and captioned by me, for the reasons as read and captioned by me. Any further discussion on the motion? I'll call the roll. Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. So I'll see you all in executive session, and then we'll come back into open session to close the hearing afterwards. And I'll see you all in executive session in a bit.
Thank you.
Okay, we're all here. We're back in open session. The only action that we have before us is to ratify the action that we took in executive session. Is there a motion to ratify?
So moved.
Vice Chair Bailey, you're on mute, so I think you came in second. We have Commissioner Dorner made the motion.
Second.
Vice Chair Bailey, you second. Okay. Any discussion on the motion? And again, this motion is to ratify the action that we took in executive session. If there's no discussion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo, if we can't hear you, just raise your hand and say you vote aye. I don't think he can see us. Can you hear us? You know, we have a quorum with the three of us, so I'm not going to worry about his vote. And let me turn, so the vote is 3-0 with one involuntary abstention, let's say. And Mr. Hunt, is there any further business to come before the planning board today?
Mr. Chairman, there are no additional business items before the planning board today, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Without objection, we are adjourned. And Commissioner Giraldo, good luck with the technology, but we're all fine. So we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.